The World Ministry of Truth and Mental Hygiene, also known as Google, announced late last week that YouTube will no longer monetize videos that contain something called climate denial. And I always chuckle when I hear that term, since it seems to imply that there's some group of people out there who don't believe weather exists. Now, I'm going to read through the entire policy, but before I do, let's state at the outset what the biggest problem is with this policy and policies like it. When a statement about the world, about reality, about what's true and what isn't, is the product of genuine, honest, dispassionate scientific inquiry, it does not need to be shielded from criticism and scrutiny. Criticism and scrutiny are what make science scientific. People who are engaged in legitimate scientific inquiry abhor and reject all forms of censorship, because censorship is the antithesis of science. When censorship is used to shield certain scientific claims from scrutiny and criticism, the people doing the censoring have lost the ability to claim that they are attempting to safeguard the truth, because what they are attempting to do is to impose and protect orthodoxy. Scientists do not act this way. People who value science do not act this way. This is the woke 21st century version of the church placing Galileo under house arrest and barring him from writing anything for public consumption. This is religious high priests protecting their doctrines because they are terrified of those doctrines being proved incorrect. And since I never need to worry about my channel being monetized, no matter how popular it gets, let's read through this statement from the high priests of Google. And go ahead and take your own mental notes as we go along, and then afterward, we'll unpack the parts that are the most laughably, comically, absurdly indefensible. Quote, "Working closely with outside experts, we regularly review and update our ads and monetization policies to help ensure a brand-safe environment for our advertising partners and to better protect users from unreliable claims, such as fake medical cures or anti-vaccine advocacy. Addressing climate change denial in recent years, we've heard directly from a growing number of our advertisers and publisher partners who have expressed concerns about ads that run alongside or promote inaccurate claims about climate change. Advertisers simply don't want their ads to appear next to this content, and publishers and creators don't want ads promoting these claims to appear on their pages or videos. That's why today, we're announcing a new monetization policy for Google advertisers, publishers, and YouTube creators that will prohibit ads for and monetization of content that contradicts well-established scientific consensus around the existence and causes of climate change. This includes content referring to climate change as a hoax or a scam, claims denying that long-term trends show the global climate is warming, and claims denying that greenhouse gas emissions or human activity contribute to climate change. When evaluating content against this new policy, we'll look carefully at the context in which claims are made, differentiating between content that states a false claim as fact versus content that reports on or discusses that claim. We will also continue to allow ads and monetization on other climate-related topics, including public debates on climate policy, the varying impacts of climate change, new research, and more. In creating this policy and its parameters, we've consulted authoritative sources on the topic of climate science, including experts who have contributed to United Nations Intragovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment reports. As is the case for many of our policies, we'll use a combination of automated tools and human review to enforce this policy against violating publisher content, Google-served ads, and YouTube videos that are monetizing via YouTube's partner program. We'll begin enforcing this policy next month. This new policy not only will help us strengthen the integrity of our advertising ecosystem, but also it aligns strongly with the work we've done as a company over the past 2 decades to promote sustainability and confront climate change head-on. End quote. Now, it's in that third paragraph where things really go off the rails. First with the phrase, content referring to climate change as a hoax or a scam. Well, in any world that values legitimate scientific inquiry, The state religion known as climate change absolutely is a hoax and a scam. If it wasn't, its proponents wouldn't deal exclusively in claims that are nebulous and nonspecific and thus unfalsifiable and hence scientifically meaningless. Next we have, quote, claims denying that long-term trends show the global climate is warming, which is an interesting bit of wordplay since detailed records go back maybe 150 years at best, and the planet is 3.7 billion years old. In the parts of the Earth that are frozen permanently, you can use ice cores to extend that insight back to around 8 or 10,000 years, but that tells us less about the planet as a whole and more about that specific local region. And even still, 10,000 years is not sufficient on the grand scale of planetary history to claim you can discern long-term global climate trends from it, much less to declare that any detected warming trend owes exclusively to human industrial activity rather than the diabolical machinations of the evil sun monster. Because I hate to break it to the high priests of Google, but that giant ball of flaming gas that sits 90 million miles away from us, that is the thing that determines what happens to our climate. If the sun monster decides there's going to be an ice age, then you can bet your sweet butt there's going to be an ice age. And if the sun monster decides there's going to be a warming trend, that is what will happen. Irrespective of any damn thing we puny little humans try to do one way or the other. The idea that humans can manipulate global weather conditions just by governments creating certain policies, that idea is laughable on its face. And finally we have, quote, claims denying that greenhouse gas emissions or human activity contribute to climate change. And this one is a rather impressive red herring because I've never heard anybody make that claim. And I wonder what is meant by greenhouse gas emissions, because one major volcanic eruption can emit more greenhouse gases than human industry ever has since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And such eruptions certainly can and do cause the global climate to change. But here we have the thing I'm talking about when I say the claims are nebulous and nonspecific and unfalsifiable. First, they don't say what they mean by greenhouse gas emissions. Then they don't say what they mean by human activity. And then they conflate the one with the other. It's so very sciencey. Please, no more science. My feeble little brain can't take no more. You know, Jim Eagle, I bet your farts contribute to climate change. I know they contribute to making my eyes water at any rate. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where our mighty cook fires contribute to climate change by blotting out the sun monster each time we roast a stag. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And let's talk about Columbus Day, or as President Biden calls it, Indigenous Peoples Day. And did I miss the part where the president was invested with the authority to just change the names of federal holidays because he feels like it? Didn't they blubber to us for like 4 years that the Trump administration was lawless and autocratic? But I never heard Trump decree that Thanksgiving would henceforth be known as Orange Jesus Day. I never heard Trump declare that landlords are no longer allowed to collect rent payments from their tenants. I don't remember Trump ever breaking the law by canceling government construction contracts whose funds had already been allocated by the Congress. But Biden, has done all of those things just in his first 9 months. So I'm sorry, remind me again which president is the lawless autocrat? So today, of course, is Columbus Day, one of those annoying federal holidays where everybody in the government gets to take the day off and the rest of us have to go to work just like every other Monday. And we've heard a lot of commentators on the right today, or I have at least, putting forth arguments for why Christopher Columbus is an admirable figure whose achievements are worthy of commemoration, rather than being the evil mustache-twirling movie villain that 21st century leftists have tried, and with much success, to turn him into in recent years. And while many of those arguments are correct, and I agree with them to a large extent, I think trying to rehabilitate the personal reputation of Christopher Columbus misses the point of what Columbus Day is supposed to be and why it was created as a federal holiday in the first place. Honoring Christopher Columbus personally was never the main point of the Columbus Day holiday. The point was to honor Italian Americans as a whole. It was a gesture of reconciliation whereby the Anglo-Saxon majority said, yes, we recognize that you Americans of Italian descent are full stakeholders in the American experiment and the American experience, and we apologize for the bigotry and discrimination and maltreatment to which you and your forebears have been subjected since arriving in this country. Columbus Day only became an official federal holiday in 1934, a mere 87 years ago, but it was first proclaimed on an unofficial basis by President Benjamin Harrison in 1892 on the occasion of the 400th anniversary of Columbus's legendary voyage. 19 months prior to that proclamation from President Harrison, on 14 March 1891, 11 Italian Americans were lynched by a mob in New Orleans in what was the largest recorded mass lynching in U.S. history. The local police chief, a man named David Hennessy, had been murdered in October of the previous year, and while lingering on his deathbed, he had identified his assailants as being Italians. At that time, there were two Italian-American crime families, the Provenzanos and the Montragnas, who were competing with one another for primacy in the running of the rackets on the New Orleans waterfront, and each tried to implicate the other in Hennessy's murder. The police investigators had no idea who was telling the truth, so they responded with a series of mass roundups of basically every guy on the street who looked like he might be of Italian extraction. They were spitballing it at this point. They didn't have the faintest idea who the killers actually were, but public anger was running at such a fever pitch because Chief Hennessy was an extremely popular guy in the local community, and the citizenry badly wanted to see his murderers brought to justice, which is understandable. 19 men were eventually tried for the crime. Some were Provenzanos, some were Montragnas, some were just unlucky enough to have been walking on the street looking Italian when one of the roundups happened. But the cops didn't really have a good case against any of them, and by 13 March, all 19 of the defendants either had mistrials declared or they were acquitted outright. But they continued to be held in protective custody in the county jail because there was an angry mob waiting outside day and night, day after day, eager to get their hands on any of the defendants who might emerge out the front gate thinking he was a free man. So on the night of 14 March, rumors started circulating in the crowd that the jury had been bribed to produce the 6 acquittals and 3 mistrials that had happened on the previous day, and the bloodlust was hitting a fever pitch, with most of the assembled mob starting to believe that these Italian crime families could murder their beloved police chief and get away scot-free if they just came up with enough bribe money and stuck it in the right people's pockets. And so, just like with many mobs before and since, the sentiment took hold that, well, if we want to see justice done, boys, then we're going to have to deliver it ourselves. So they tore down the gates of the jail, they overpowered the guards, and within a matter of about 90 minutes, 9 of the 19 defendants had been killed, most of them by shooting, a few by hanging, a couple beaten to death. Nobody was ever charged with any crime. In the immediate aftermath of the lynching in the national press, the coverage tended to be mostly favorable toward the lynch mob, portraying them not as crazed vigilante killers, but as noble citizens who had meted out justice when the system failed to do its job. But that sentiment didn't last very long. Even though nobody involved was an actual Italian citizen, the Italian government was sufficiently horrified to recall its ambassador and cut off diplomatic relations. For a time, there were even rumblings about the two countries going to war. But as 1891 turned into 1892, the American people started looking at themselves in the mirror and asking, is this who we want to be? Now, last year in 2020, we heard the phrase a lot, and we still hear it. A national reckoning on race. Well, a national reckoning on race was what really happened in early and mid-1892 as a result of the New Orleans lynchings of 1891. The American people in large numbers arrived at the realization that Italian Americans had been horribly mistreated and it needed to stop. So when President Harrison declared the unofficial observance of a Columbus Day on 12 October 1892, it was the culmination of that reckoning, and it had very little to do with honoring Christopher Columbus. It used Christopher Columbus and his achievement of being the European discoverer of the Americas as a vessel whereby the country could start to do right by its citizens of Italian extraction, to honor their contributions, to signify that they will be always and forever full partners in the society and the culture of the United States. So when modern-day wokesters, even the President of the United States himself, when they start denigrating Columbus, trashing him as a villain, unilaterally changing the name of his holiday, it's not Columbus that they're slandering. It is all Italian Americans. And if there's anything we know about our woke iconoclast friends on the left, the people who are happy to tear down any statue of somebody they perceive to be white, it's that they never, ever, ever stop when you give them a taste of blood. So let's say they succeed in eradicating the name of Columbus Day and replacing it with this nonsensical thing called Indigenous Peoples Day. Do you think they're just going to leave well enough alone after that and happily go along their way and consider their mission accomplished? Because they won't. They will not rest. They will not be satisfied until every single thing that carries the name of Christopher Columbus is wiped from history, just as his eponymous holiday was. Now, I've prepared a list, which is extensive but by no means exhaustive, of just a smattering of the things in this country that are named for Columbus. And we probably have more places, things, and entities named for this guy than for anybody else. And make no mistake, be under no illusions. If we let them take the name of the holiday, they are coming after all of it. First, the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, named for Columbus. Columbia, South Carolina, that state's capital city. Columbia County, Georgia. Columbia County, Florida. Columbia County, Pennsylvania. Columbia County, Wisconsin. Columbia County, Oregon. Columbia County, New York. Columbia County, Arkansas. Columbia County, Washington. Oh, that one's a double whammy right there. Columbus and Washington in the same county name. That is so unwoke, I don't know what to do. Columbia Records, Columbia Pictures, Columbia University, the Columbia Broadcast System, better known as CBS. Columbia Sportswear, Columbia Island, Columbia Valley, the Columbia River, the Space Shuttle Columbia, the Apollo 11 Command Module Columbia, the Columbia Turnpike, Columbia Valley, Columbia Island, Columbia Lake, Columbia Glacier. And I could go on at considerable length, but you get the picture. And if we continue to allow the worst people among us, the people who wouldn't know our nation's history if it broke into their house and copulated with their fucking dog, to dictate the terms of our public discourse, to cudgel us with their bullshit wokesterism and decree what we're allowed to say and whom we're allowed to honor, to declare that no historical personage can be commemorated who failed in his own life to live up to the moral standards of 21st century wokesterism, then we will all live to see those names stripped away, each last one of them, and every other name with roots in our history, every single thing that honors or commemorates a personage from our past and comprises one of the threads of our common culture. Nobody ever raised a statue to Christopher Columbus because they wanted to celebrate cruelty toward or subjugation of any indigenous population group. Just like nobody ever raised a statue to Robert E. Lee or Stonewall Jackson because they wanted to say, "Hooray for slavery!" These are simplistic, nonsensical, ignorant, childlike readings of history that decent people must reject in the most forceful terms possible. Those statues, all of them, were raised as symbols of reconciliation between groups of Americans who had once opposed each other, but came to think the better of it. Do we want to embrace the spirit of reconciliation, or do we want to reject it and divide ourselves into the same sorts of warring camps that those statues were raised to reject and repudiate? How long will we allow the most historically ignorant among us to dictate how we are allowed to view and talk about our own history? It was progressive liberal Democrats who spent 50 years agitating for Columbus Day to be declared a federal holiday. And today it is progressive liberal Democrats who seek to erase that same holiday and malign as a racist and a white supremacist all those who seek to observe it. These people have never been burdened with an abundance of self-awareness, but this may be a new low point. Thanks for watching. See you Wednesday. Never be ashamed to say Happy Columbus Day. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.